I'm going to start this video by discussing what it is and what it is not. This is a historical look at the game The Suffering. This is not a video discussing whether this is or is not a survival horror game. Describing this game is actually probably one of the more interesting ones we've had to do so far. This is the most Silent Hill game that actually isn't a Silent Hill game. There are a lot of really weird ideas thrown into this one, including you can play this game in the first person view or the third. That's right, when they designed this game they wanted to give you options in how you wish to play, which is neat, but very weird. This game was released for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC back in 2004. I actually remember renting this game from Blockbuster while I was doing one of my college internships. This one was made by Surreal Software and published by Midway. Unfortunately though, this happens to be one of the last games produced by Surreal Software, as they ended up closing up shop after release of the sequel. You play as a character named Torque, an inmate that is just being transferred into a new prison. This one being the Abbott State Penitentiary on Carney Island. Would be a rather boring game if that's where it ended, so an earthquake goes off and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. This would be a rather boring game if that's where it ended, so an earthquake goes off and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. Objective of the game: escape the island alive. This is way easier said than done. The island is now home to a lot of different monsters that were released during the earthquake. Now, one of the reasons why I say this is a very Silent Hill-esque game is because all of the monsters actually mean something in this game. I am fully aware that a lot of other videos make claims like all of the monsters are based off of executions on the island. That is not actually the case. Clearly these people are ill-informed, never bothered doing the research into the game, or never actually played the game themselves, which honestly I feel like that one might be the most likely. So let's talk about a few of these monsters. The Slayers, a humanoid beast with blades on their limbs. This seems to be based on decapitation, judging by how the heads aren't actually connected to the rest of the body, but is hung slightly above. The Marksmen may be my personal favorite in appearance. Large, bulky beings with weird sac growths coming out of their backs, with gun barrels coming from those. These represent death by firing squad. The Mainliner is a squat little beast, what appears to be deformed legs and large syringes stuck all over them. Clearly based on death by lethal injection. This is where the connection to executions actually end. They are still based on deaths, but not executions, and I'm making that distinction here. Nooseman, You may think this is clearly a depiction about being executed by hanging, but you would actually be wrong. They represent several of the prison correctional officers who were hung as retaliation for their actions that actually led to our next monster. Burrowers are my least favorite creature in the game. They are the least humanoid-looking monster in the game that represents a bunch of prisoners who were buried alive in a quarry cave-in where several COs never bothered to even save them. Festers and the rats they spawn are also fairly frustrating monsters. A slave ship crashed on the island, and Festers are the slaves that were left on the crashed ship to be eaten alive by rats. Inferna. They are small girls who suddenly turn into beings of flame. They're supposed to represent victims of witch trials, and the three girls who were the accusers. I'm not sure why both were necessary. The game actually uses a morality system, and there's several ways you can figure out where you fall on that system. The easiest way is by looking at a photograph in your inventory. The image is of Torque's deceased family, and judging by the condition of the photo, you can see where you are on that graph. There are actually 3 bosses that are directly tied to your morality as well: Dr. Killjoy, Horus, and Hermes. Another little random tidbit that I thought was very interesting is that Torque can turn into this giant hulking monster, but for some reason, the other inmates and correctional officers can't see this transformation. Only the player can. This game was a complete success when it was released. Sold over 1.5 million copies, and was actually given a ton of praise for things, including monster design, voice work, and a lot of risks that they took for the game. Believe it or not, they actually were in talks to make a movie based on this. MTV and Midway were in discussions, but for some reason, things just kind of fizzled out. This may have been a good or a bad thing. I think if nothing else, it would have been one of the more interesting game adaptations for film. At the time of recording this, I'm actually completely unaware of any other media based on this, which is really surprising because I think this would have made a badass comic book franchise. Like a few other games on the list, this game has already kind of been forgotten, except for people who are really into horror games or really into PS2 games. There are a couple reasons why I think this game has been kind of forgotten. So we're actually leaving the realm of history and getting into conjecture, in my opinion, which is something we don't usually do. This game is actually very over the top, which normally would help it standing in people's memories, but I don't think it really works out to its benefit this time. None of the voice actors in this are actually bad. I think for the most part they're very well done, and that's also part of the problem. Some of this comes off as very cringy, and also is very early in the game when you meet a character that is in prison for sexual-based crimes. It's rather off-putting, to say the least. There are some crazily designed monsters in this game, all of which from the mind of Stan Winston. This man is an icon in monster design. The sad thing is, even though these monsters look amazing and have these great stories based on them, it's really overshadowed when the game is actually lacking in gore to kind of meet the same standard. The biggest issue I have with this game has got to be is the controls. Not only did these not age well, I don't think they were ever good to begin with. It's very awkward when one of the buttons switches you from first to third person, and I constantly struggle to remember what button did what. I think the game would have actually benefited if they had taken one of those viewpoints and based the game off that instead of allowing for both. Of course, this last section was all opinion and conjecture, and you're welcome to tell me how wrong I am in the comments down below. I feel like my opinions on the Suffering are not all that far-fetched, and we can discuss the future of the Suffering franchise when we eventually get to the sequel, The Suffering: Ties That Bind. Thank you for watching my video on the suffering. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, long days, pleasant nights, and may you have twice the number.